and welcome back to the Chargers Check-In. My name is Cecilia, and today we're going to be talking about every roster need that the Chargers have going into 2026. They have a lot of needs and a lot of cap space to address it, and this is an exciting draft class that I think is going to give the Chargers fans a lot of reasons to pay attention to this offseason. So I'm going to start on the offensive side, and then we'll look at the defense. Some of these are more obvious, and some of these, I'm curious what you all will think about my takes on it. So on the offensive side, obviously we got to start in the offensive line. The Chargers need a center, a guard, a swing tackle, and a swing guard. They need 4 additions to this offensive line. Bradley Bozeman retired, they will cut Mekhi Becton, and it's hard to imagine that Andre James, the backup center, will be back. This is a really good center draft class, in my opinion, especially towards the top. I question the wisdom in waiting to the bottom or the later rounds to draft someone just because some of those guys aren't necessarily pro ready. So you would have to sign someone anyways. In terms of free agency, the guard class is a lot better than the center class. At least it's a lot more deep, so you have a lot more options. And there will be swing tackle options in later rounds, but I think a veteran in that role is a lot more reassuring. And that's a lot of needs on the offensive line. If they re-sign Zion, and I think that they should, I made that case in my last video, I think they still need to sign at least 2 players ahead of the draft. You need some kind of starter between either center or guard, and you need either a swing tackle or swing guard. Maybe you can draft 2 offensive linemen in the draft, someone in a starting interior role, and then someone in a depth, either interior or tackle role. But either way, you have to go into the draft having signed some of these guys. That's just the unfortunate reality. You are probably going to have to overpay because that's just where the guard market is right now, and the center market is also kind of exploding, although there aren't as many options there. That's what they need on the offensive line. It's going to take a lot to get it. You cannot just solve it in free agency or just solve it in the draft because of the volume of needs, in my opinion. I think there's a lot to be excited about in terms of free agent guards, in terms of draftable centers, and I think the Chargers have what they need to get this done. It's not easy to turn around 3 interior positions, which is why I think it's so important that they re-sign Zion, but I think with a new starting center, you can see new life breathed into this offense, which is very exciting. Also in the offensive side, I think they need a deep threat receiver. I don't know how people generally feel about the Chargers wide receiver room. Last year, that is, I spoke pretty highly of them, but as the season went on, it did feel like other teams kind of had them figured out. They knew what routes they were running and everything else to do with the play callers, but it also felt like there was a gap in what the play caller had to work with. It felt like the Chargers were missing someone who can really take the cap off the defense, really stretch the field, and force defenses to play and plan for explosive play prevention. And that's something that the Chargers just didn't really have, and a new player adds another wrinkle for defenses to figure out. It's a chance for complementary skill sets, either a super fast field stretcher, like I said, or I think there's an argument for a shifty contested catch kind of guy, someone with big hands, who's taller, who can help you out in the red zone a lot. I just think Quentin Johnston and Trey Harris in particular would be a lot more productive if teams didn't play so close to the line of scrimmage, if teams weren't, willing to take a chance on whatever happens behind them, because so much of the Chargers passing game happened on that first and second level and not enough was happening on the third level. So you need to give defenses a reason to back up on you, and I think QJ can get back to being the yards after the catch guy if he gets the ball in space a little bit more. I think it would also improve their quick game to have the defense not so close all the time on passing downs. It would force defenses to prioritize stopping the quick game or prevent explosive plays. Either way is a choice that helps blockers get an advantage in the run game and gets their defenders in motion where they want them. I think in a wide zone scheme that makes a lot of sense and is important. A true contested catch guy would also help in the red zone. I think, someone who teams have to put their most physical corner onto. I don't think, obviously teams would be putting their best corner on Ladd, but in terms of, in the red zone, physical guy, yeah, Ladd is a threat because he always is, but he is a threat mostly with space to work with. Someone who you can just kind of throw the ball up to and he's probably going to win. That takes their best corner off of Ladd, off of Gadsden, and I think that makes both of them a lot better in the red zone. So those are my thoughts on wide receiver. In a similar vein, because I think wide receiver can be filled in the draft, I want to think about what it would look like for the Chargers to have a blocking tight end. I think that that's an area where they can upgrade, because I think they need someone lighter, more agile than Tucker Fisk, and someone who can be a tight end too in receiving as well. It could be a free agent, a trade candidate. I honestly think about Cole Kmet from the Bears, who isn't a primary receiving option, but shows up in key moments, keeps defenses honest about all of their coverage. I think the Bears are honestly pretty likely to trade him. His production has dropped off significantly since the addition of Colston Loveland. And, if you don't want to go the trade route, there are obviously good free agent options. You'll once again be hearing rumors of David Njoku to the Chargers for like the 10th year in a row. I don't know how many times we're going to hear that. But, I just think you need someone who isn't the same profile as Oronde Gadsden and who can be a reliable blocker for you in the run game. It can't be someone who, when they're out there, you go, yeah, 90% of the time they're just going to run the ball. That's just not good enough. And I don't think Mike McDaniel is going to be someone who falls victim to that. But, if you sign a free agent or if you draft someone, I think you're in a better spot. It's not an amazing tight end draft class. I think a lot of them are kind of more of the profile of Oronde Gadsden. That's just kind of the direction that college tight ends seem to be going in. But there are options. I think between the 4th and 6th round, you're going to find some of those blocking tight end options who can also be threats in the passing game. I would like someone, a little bit thicker than Oronde Gadsden, who can be a little bit more of a people mover, but also I want someone with hands. I want someone who is a real threat on passing downs and who can give Mike McDaniel as many creative options as they possibly can. Those are the offensive needs. The Chargers just have to make significant improvements to the offensive side of the ball. They really do. They have a fantastic offensive coordinator. They need to take advantage of it. I would not expect more than a couple free agent signings, but I would guess that the biggest ones are on the offensive side. Even if we see more total resources put into the defense with a young defensive coordinator, I just think the offense is missing pieces in a much more significant way. That being said, let's get into the defense, because here is where it gets interesting, because I think people are kind of divided about what the Chargers defense needs, and we are used to the Chargers defense playing at such a high level under Minter, but now with Chris O'Leary, there's a lot of question marks. We don't know, can he get the same level of play out of the corner room and the safety room that Jesse Minter always got? Can he get the same level of play out of this defensive line? And luckily you have some continuity. Steve Klingscale still being there with the DBs and Mike Elston still being there with the defensive line. But even then, there's a lot of free agents that we're not sure who all are coming back. So that's something we need to address. If you don't upgrade some aspects of this roster, I think you can kind of expect a regression, with Minter leaving, and he had 2 years in this scheme. Obviously, Chris O'Leary runs something very, very similar, but even so, Minter just did it at such a high level. You have to be willing to invest ultimately. So I want to start with corner. I like the corner room overall. I think there's a lot of talent, but there just isn't a clear cornerback one. Even if you think Tarheeb still is the best of this group, I just don't think he is a cornerback one right now. Cam Hart has had some injuries that make you question his availability in the future. I really like his play. I like how physical he is. He's a good tackler, but I think the addition of another taller physical corner could help round out this room, open up the ability to play in man coverage when Chris O'Leary wants to. And like I said, as many options as possible for your coordinators is always a really good thing from a roster perspective. A great corner can feel like a luxury during the season, but I think if you look at most successful playoff teams, they have great wide receivers, and a great corner can mitigate that threat significantly and, kind of force teams to run the ball, force teams to go to secondary options and play outside of their primary playbook, which I think is a really big deal. Corners aren't often found in free agency. They're too valuable. It's too hard to find. Usually when guys are athletic enough and big enough and have the ball skills to play corner, they're just wide receivers, so they just, you can't have too many corners, is something Joe Ortiz has said, and pro-ready corners in the draft are hard to find after the third-ish round, but how high of a draft pick do you want to invest in corner? And because of that, you kind of have a team that doesn't have any premium talent in that room. So I think if you can draft a traits guy who you believe in, in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, and then develop them over the course of the season, they could be in a better position if Cam Hart or Tarheeb still goes down again. Plus, a good corner could help on special teams, whether it's the player you draft playing on special teams or if that then pushes one of the other players to be able to be a contributor in that way. Because you don't want someone who is playing almost every defensive snap to also be playing on special teams. That just wears down the body too much. But if you can add another body to the room, maybe you feel a little better about that. So I think that could ultimately be a really big difference. And I don't know. I am willing to hear the argument that if Jermod McCoy is available at pick 22, that maybe he should be the guy. I don't think any other corner comes close to being worth it in the first round, but that's just my opinion. Let me know if there is a name that you guys would consider there. And after corner, I think one of their biggest needs is safety. This isn't something I see people talk a lot. People believe that Tony Jefferson will be re-signed. I think he should be. And RJ Mickens is coming along really well considering how late of a draft pick he was. There is a need to look to the future here. There's a need to get ahead of this. And one of Tony Jefferson's strengths is that he is so good at coming downhill and playing physical against the run. He's a good tackler. And I think he makes a big difference on screens as well. And Mickens, he's still developing in that regard. I think he's a little more useful in coverage, and I think we've seen his instincts in coverage improve. And you also have to think Derwin James's contract will be up after this year. The Chargers will need someone to build around like him. Yes, they will most likely give him that third contract, but it'd be nice if they weren't in a position where they had to, and if they had some leverage going into that. Also, it just gives you a little bit of room if Chris O'Leary isn't able to get out of Derwin James what Jesse Minter was. I have doubt that will be an issue because I think, with how big of an impact Chris O'Leary had on Derwin James, it just seems likely to me that trend is going to continue. I feel really optimistic about that, but it would just be ideal to have options, and you might be able to find someone in that role. And maybe because of Derwin, you look at that and you go, okay, we won't get the guy we're going to build around at safety. We might be able to get him at a different position, and that's when I would look to linebacker, which we will talk about in a little bit. But first I want to talk about defensive tackle, because specifically the Chargers need someone who can rush the passer from the interior. This doesn't have to be someone who's a 3-down player. It would be ideal because Deshaun Hand's a free agent. Otito Ogbonya is a free agent. I think it's possible they re-sign Deshaun Hand, but I think they're going to have to pay him a little bit for it. Ideally, I think you get someone in the draft or sign someone who can be a contributor to run defense and pass rush, who can be a solid part of the rotation and not just a third down rusher. Although, if you re-sign Deshaun Hand and you want to kind of piece it together, I think there's a good argument to be made. They just need more pressure from the interior. They re-signed Tier Tart. He can get cleanup sacks. He can compress the pocket a bit. He's not really there to be a significant contributor in that regard. In the run game, he's very aggressive, and I think he's very effective, but sometimes he misses big because that's just the price of aggression. I'm fine with that. I have no issue with that. I just think he needs to be next to someone with a lot of gap discipline. I think that's kind of what we're missing in that regard. And if you sign someone with more gap discipline in run defense, then you have a really good complementary group. The defensive tackle draft class is really talented at the top, but also it's really deep. It is possible for Caleb Banks to be on the board at 22. And honestly, the way people are talking about Peter Woods is blowing my mind. This is someone, if you watch my defensive tackles video, I said this is a top 10 talent. And I mostly stand by that now. I really think he should go top 15. I don't know, the way people are talking about him, it's like, injuries and he had a bad year and all this. I look at the 2024 tape and say if your team can't work with this, I mean, come on. You know what I mean? So it's mind-blowing. If Peter Woods is there, you can run that pick in and I'm fine. I ideally want the Chargers to trade out of that first pick at 22. Honestly, trade out of the first round, I think could make a lot of sense. But either of those players could immediately make your third down defense better. And I think either of them could be there on running downs as well and be contributors. Even as late as the third round, though, there should be solid all-around defensive tackles that give you that pass rush juice. And pass rush juice is the most important thing, I think, in this regard. I do think the defensive tackle class skews a little bit more toward run defense, which is interesting. You get kind of a few really traditional nose tackle types coming out of here. I wonder if Peter Woods is going to remind the world who he is at the combine. He was talking a big game and I liked it. That's the kind of energy I want from an interior defensive lineman. If Peter Woods somehow is there at 22, yeah, you run that pick in. Or you use it to trade with the Bears at 25 or, the Bengals, whoever needs some juice on the defensive line, and you get a huge haul out of it because these players are worth so much. Caleb Banks at 22, it's one of those things where I'm not quite sure where I stand. I would probably be more comfortable taking him around 28 or 30 or something. And it's possible they could find a trade partner in that range if you have one of the top guards available or something like that. But it's also, the way that teams see it is going to be similar to how we see it. And if Caleb Banks is on the board at 22, I would understand picking him because he is kind of that all-around package player. Peter Woods would add so much in pass rush, so they have options. They're going to have options at 22. There is a world in which Caleb Banks and Peter Woods aren't there. I hope they have a trade partner to get out of there at that point, but I just think they need a well-rounded guy who skews a little bit more toward pass rush. If they can't get it on day 1, they should be able to get it on late day 2 or early day 3. But it's something I think they need to prioritize in free agency or in the draft. And ideally in the draft because they've already spent money on the position and because if you can get somebody of the future, you pair them with Thule on the line, with Odafe Owe if you're able to re-sign him, and you have a really good defensive line into the future. And we have seen how great defensive lines can carry defenses. I would love that for Chris O'Leary going into his first year as a coordinator. So I mentioned earlier that I think linebacker is kind of a need. And I think about how the run defense last year got a lot worse when Denzel Perryman wasn't available. Also, Khalil Mack being in and out kind of affected that as well. Don't want to, understate that, but they also had issues of coverage up the middle at times, and that's not really a Denzel Perryman thing because that's not what he's out there for. Deion Henley had an off year, and while I do believe he will be back to form in 2026, especially with some new coaches around, I do think you have to wonder, what about Junior Colson? He's kind of been nothing since he was picked, and he's had these weird freak injuries, but even when he's been out there, he has looked so lost. He just hasn't had enough time, and you have to ask, will the Chargers miss out on a fantastic linebacker draft because they still believe in Junior Colson? How much do you believe in Junior Colson? And that's a question that we can't really answer. You need the answer from the people who are watching him practice every single day. And that's one of the things we can't do. But if they decide that, Junior Colson, we think he'll contribute in some way, but we can't count on him being the leader out there that we thought, you have to consider dipping into this fantastic draft class. And, channel members, if you click join, you can become one. They already have my top 8 linebackers video. You'll all get it sometime soon, probably in the next week. I'm also going to make a video about number 9 through 15 in the linebacker class because it is very deep and very exciting. And I also want to remind people, the Chargers need contributors in special teams. They really do, and we need tacklers. We need guys who are fast, who are smart, and who can mitigate some of the damage done. And we've traded away some of the special teams players. Special teams had a down year. I don't just want special teams to be something we don't think about it. I want it to be a real plus. Yes, that starts with getting a new returner and improving that in some way, but it's also about, the defense in that sense. And I think a good linebacker would be a really big impact on that. So even if you get someone who isn't right away a starter, a lot of linebackers are also special teamers in college. I know it's not a one-to-one with the kickoff rules being different. I'm fine with that. I still believe in Ryan Ficken to bring these guys in. And obviously punt defense is punt defense. It is what it is. I would love to get somebody like Jacob Rodriguez, Kyle Lewis, one of the guys on that list with really good coverage instincts, or if you want to go the other direction, a tone setter in the run game like Josiah Trotter, someone who can prevent those dips in performance that we saw last year. And, they would bring some kind of pass rush to the game as well. And I appreciate what Chris O'Leary has been able to do in terms of pass rush at Western Michigan. It's very creative, and I think that's something he's going to want the Chargers to continue. We saw Jesse Minter do that. Minter loved having Derwin James blitz or Tarheeb Still. He wants every position on the field to be a threat to blitz, and that's something I see O'Leary continuing. And I think a good linebacker, if you get one of these top 8, pretty much any of them can rush the passer reasonably well. Some of the ones at the top are really good at that, or you get ones that are, they're outside linebackers, but they're kind of edge rushers like Jayshon Barham, I think is his name, from Michigan. There are going to be a lot of options, and the idea of missing out on such a great class, I don't know. I don't really like that. I don't like that, but only people in the room, only people who've been at practice every day can really know where Junior Colson is, because he was so smart at Michigan. And I know linebacker is just a hard position to transition into the NFL with, but It is hard to believe that he would just be a nothing player. I mean, do we think his NFL career just is never going to take off and he won't be in the NFL in a couple years? That's just so hard to believe after what we saw from Michigan. So I won't blame the Chargers if they don't take advantage of this class, but minimum, I hope they draft someone, mid to late day 3, someone who can contribute on special teams. I think that could be a really big deal. But moving on, the last position on defense I want to talk a little bit about is edge rusher. So the Chargers have a great edge rusher room, right? But we don't know that they're going to get all of them back. Thule, still under contract. Great. Hopefully they're going to work on an extension with him. Odafe Oweh could get expensive. It is possible that teams only look at this last year and go, he got 3 sacks in a playoff game. We need that guy. And I would get it, but I would wonder, why was Odafe Oweh struggling so much with the team that drafted him, with the Ravens, and then it goes to the Chargers, who are supposed to be like the Ravens West, and he looks really good. Is that an Odafe Oweh thing, or is that a Chargers thing? And something Daniel Popper pointed out recently, he had an interview with the Athletic football show, and, he talked about how well the edge rushers work together, how unselfishly they play. And I think about how Odafe Oweh is a real complementary piece to Khalil Mack and Thule. Khalil and Thule are really good. They're more of bull rushers, even though Thule has, he's gained more pass rushing moves. You don't think about them as the guys who chase quarterbacks to the sidelines. And for Odafe Oweh, that is what you think about. And I think he has been a plus in run defense as well. I don't think anyone expected that. So that's been a big deal. So you want them back. But if they get really expensive and you don't get Odafe Oweh back, you pretty much have to draft someone. The difference between having Oweh and not having him was huge. Khalil Mack, he's going to be a little injury prone. He's older. It's also possible that he retires. But even best case scenario, say you get all these guys back and your defensive line is exactly where you want it, you still have to think about the future. Because if Khalil Mack plays this year, do you really think he's going to play next year? Do you want to take a chance on that? Or do you want to be forced to draft an edge rusher next year? I would rather draft someone a little later this year, knowing that you can develop them, or even draft somebody on day 2, probably not day 1. I mean, it depends how the board falls. There's an argument for Keldrick Falk or TJ Parker being worthy of that 22 pick, but even then you're getting more of a run defense guy. I just wonder about the pass rush juice that you're going to be missing if you don't draft one of these guys when you have the opportunity. So, for me, I would look at someone like LT Overton or Gabe Akis. Gabe Akis is one of my favorites. And with his style, I think he would be a good Khalil Mack successor. And, if you lose Odafe Oweh, maybe you go for more of a finesse guy. I think about Romello Height and how, I've been farther down on him than other people because he's smaller, he's lighter, gets moved in the run game, shorter arms and all that. But if all you need out of him is third down pass rushing, yeah, you're going to get that out of him. So they have a lot of options. It's just, I don't ever want to be behind in the trenches. That's kind of where we are with the interior of the offensive line. You didn't draft interior offensive line in the last 2 years enough, and because of that, you're going to have to go overpay a guard, or you're going to have to go overpay a center. So be it. That's the reality. I don't want to make the same mistake on the other side of the ball. I want the trenches taken care of. I would so much rather have to overpay for a corner, a safety, a linebacker, a tight end, whatever it takes, probably everything other than wide receiver, as opposed to a trench player. I think that the trenches are so important to how Chris O'Leary is going to want to do things and what Harbaugh believes in the identity of this team and getting the most out of the players that they are going to pay. Thule's going to get a big payday. Let's make that the right choice. It is, of course, the right choice, but there's something to be said about this is what we're investing in. Let's be fully invested in it. Let's make the defensive line a real strength of this defense, not just in 2026, because a point that I'm going to be making a lot soon is that people keep saying like the Chargers need to go all in and, put all the chips on the table and this is their year. There's no reason that next year can't also be a year for them to be aggressive. There's no reason the year after that can't also be a year. Obviously, by then you're looking at Herbert's contract and stuff, but I think this is the beginning of the Super Bowl window. I don't think we have a reason to think that this is going to be their only or best chance. So they should be aggressive, but they should think about the future. And with how well Joe Ortiz has drafted, I think that they're going to draft for the future and get guys who can contribute now. That is just how it has worked, and I believe in Mike Elston's ability to bring in somebody on the edge, and I believe in Steve Klingscale to bring in those DBs, and so I hope that the Chargers think about the future in terms of the draft and use free agency as a way of shoring up their needs so that they end up with the best player available being the most likely strategy at most picks. So those are my thoughts on the roster needs in general. Let me know if you think that I missed any positions, if you actually feel good about any of these positions and you don't think that they're in need. And of course, let me know your favorite free agent and draft targets or any sneaky trade targets that you see. I got my eye on Cole Kmet. I've been thinking that for a little while now, but I want to know what you all think. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. Please like and subscribe if you've liked what you've seen. And if you want bonus content, feel free to click join and become one of my channel members who I'm very grateful to, who are, of course, receiving bonus content and, of course, who get early access to the draft content that I do. And the draft content is going to ramp way up after the combine. I love this time of year. I cannot wait to come back with everyone's measurables and 40 times and verticals and absolutely everything that comes out of the draft. And I hope you guys stick with me through it. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you guys next time.